program that we want to share with you. There's a couple things that we're going to do. You're going to make sure that you have a bulletin, a program. If you don't have one, you may not know the words to the song. So make sure that you have one of these. Anybody not have one of these that needs one? Everybody has one? All right, cool, because we're going to sing a few songs, and we're going to share in a very powerful message this morning. Very much looking forward to it. How many of you were here last year and heard Major Burkett speak last year? So about half. Okay, there you go. Half the people have heard the story. And so let's share in a word of prayer. Lord God, as we gather today, we thank you for this absolute privilege that is to live in this great country. So often forget the men and women that paved the way for the freedom and life. I thank you for reaching out to us in so many ways, especially through your Son, Jesus Christ. We're so grateful for your love. Lord, as we sing, as we share in this time of worship, would you glorify the name. Let's stand up. You can look on your sheet in front of you. We're going to sing the song Soldiers of Christ Arise. It'll say, God is still the same. When did he break his promise? When did his kindness fail? Never has, never will. My God is still the same. When did he lose his power? When did his mercy change? Never has, never will. My God is still the same. Yeah, not once did he ever stop moving. Not once has he ever let go. Not once did he ever stop proving our God is in control. Not once did he ever stop moving. Not once has he ever let go. Not once did he ever stop proving our God is in control. When did he break his promise? When did his kindness fail? Never has, never will. My God is still the same. When did he lose his power? When did his mercy change? Never has, never will. My God is still the same. Not once did he ever stop moving. Not once has he ever let go. Commit this time to you. Commit this message to you. Thank you for this great man of God that you have brought to us today. Thank you for the ways in which you have touched our hearts. Lord, we pray that we would be able to set aside whatever the distractions of the day are in front of us, that we would be able to focus on the things that you want to say to us. Thank you for the story that Major Burkett is going to share today. Thank you for the things, God, that you have done in his life, in the ways that you've challenged him, in the ways, God, that you have changed his life. And we are so ever grateful. God, we commit this time to you. In the name of Jesus.
Can't escape disappointment.
So I just want to introduce Major Eric Burkett to you this morning. He's a retired Marine Corps major. Eric's family, which is pretty cool, and I don't remember if you told us this before, but he can trace the lineage of his family all the way back to the War of Independence, isn't it? That his family has been involved in wars. Your grandfather was in World War II, right? Both grandfathers in World War II. Your dad fought in what? Vietnam. Pretty crazy. He goes back to his family and the lineage there. And so he's going to share with us a story about moving into the Marine Corps, being an assault pilot, and what happened in his life. The power of God in the midst of all of the turmoil and struggles and all that. Let's welcome Eric Burkett.
It's a season for healing. It's a season for change. To see miracles happen that no one can fathom and heaven invades. And it's more than a feeling, and it's anchored in praise. And when it's the darkest, it reaches the farthest and opens the way.
It's a busy time of year for me. We do a lot of speaking. I'm excited about that. Yesterday I was one of the things they had
This is how blind men get their sight. This is how dead men start to rise. This is how small things multiply.
Those of you who don't know, the Hebrew globe and egg theory is simple.
Nothing's impossible. This is where oceans have to part. This is where light cuts through the dark. This is where I see who you are. Nothing's impossible. Nothing's impossible.
This grueling training exercise. It's called the Crucible, and
I will stand in faith. Walk by faith. Yes, I will. Yes, I will. I believe. I believe. Let the church rise up. Let the people of God
at the
rise
end of
up.
these 3 days, I will tell you that my feet were bloody, my hands were raw, I was chafed, beat up, bruised, covered in dirt and sand, generally miserable. We get lined up in front of one of the buildings there, and we're just kind of waiting for the next, excuse this expression, but the next hazing evolution that we were about to go through. And then they call us to attention. And they present us with our first eagle, globe, and anchor. And suddenly, all the misery, all the frustration, all the pain, the anguish, the sore muscles, the loads that we've been carrying are lost, are shed. It's amazing, this transformation that happens when you get this little piece of metal that symbolizes what you're going for. And then right after that, you go through, you recite your enlistment oath. You've already taken it before you started, but we do it again to remind us what we're doing and the importance of the occasion. So it's really kind of a neat situation to be in. For those of you that don't know, on April 11th, 2012, I was in an Osprey crash. I was serving with the Marine Corps in Africa. And for those of you who don't know what an Osprey is, it's the world's sexiest aircraft. I think you can Google that. But we crashed in North Africa. My 2 crew chiefs were killed. And it changed things. It was a huge course correction in my life. But one thing that I learned in the military, and I'm sure those of the veterans can testify to this as well, regardless of what you join the military for, you soon learn that it's not about you. Your success, your failures, it's a collective effort. And if everybody's putting in hard work, maximum effort, pulling their load, things go really well. Now, obviously there's times where people do things that are noteworthy and carry the load more than others. We try to recognize that. But in general, on a day-to-day basis, the accomplishment of the mission isn't about any specific individual effort, but it's this collective effort. So now, I'm at Walter Reed, and initially when I showed up, I had both legs. They had been able to reattach them through a whole bunch of surgeries and some cool scientific stuff. And I was told initially that I was only going to be there 6 to 8 months at Walter Reed. And I'd be able to get back to the fleet, go back and do Marine things. Well, the Lord had other plans. And it was into my 3rd year at Walter Reed
that I had found out that I had a raging MRSA infection in my left knee. And on top of that, the infection had spread to my blood. And that I needed to get my affairs in order because of there was a good probability that I would not be able to beat the battle against this infection. Well, and in my frustration and anger and anxiety, I found myself calling a lady from my church in North Carolina where I was stationed before I got hurt. Her name was Mary Respis, a true Southern belle. And she sat there patiently and listened to me from the other end of the phone, and she said, finally, "Honey, this isn't about you. This isn't about you." And I think my response to that was, "Mary, I hate you." Really, I was just like, this sweet lady threw a verbal throat punch at me and hit me square, and I tell you what, I mean, it snapped me back to reality. It was like, wow, you're right, it isn't about me. And then she went on to say, so quit fooling around. Quit fooling around up there, quit making this about you, and get to the Lord's work. If it was just about you getting healthy, you'd have been healthy and down the road and do whatever it is you were supposed to be doing. But there's still more work for you to do at Walter Reed. So get busy. Because it wasn't about me. And I think last year, you recall, those of you that were here, I talk about Uriah the Hittite. Uriah the Hittite, man, what a great story in the sense that it's not about you. So Uriah is part of the mighty men of Israel. It's a group of 37 men, the core group. It grows at times and it comes shrinks or whatever. But these are like the elite military guys in the Israel army, the mighty men. And there's all kinds of accolades. It talks about a man that had killed 800 men with his sword on one day. I can't imagine what that looks like. Another man who had killed 300 men, but the fighting was so intense that they couldn't take the sword from his hand at the end of the day. There was another man in this group of mighty men that had said that killed 2 giants, a 10-foot Egyptian, and a lion in a pit on a snowy day. Now, a little side note here. How big do you have to be for a 10-foot Egyptian not to be counted in with you? Seriously. You're a 10-foot Egyptian, but you're not considered a giant. I don't know. It's a couple pretty big dudes. Anyway, so these guys are pretty tough. And most of them, it is said, that were with David when he fled and was hiding from Saul in the wilderness, when he was hunted by the king of Israel. Well, Uriah the Hittite, he's at war, and the young King David wakes up from a nap in the middle of the day, which, I don't know, always I thought was funny, The king's taking a nap while his guys are fighting a war. Okay. I guess it's good to be the king. But then he decides to take a stroll along the palace roof, and he looks down into a courtyard and he sees a beautiful woman. And he lusts after her. And he sends his servants to go get her, and they fetch her, bring her back to the palace. Don't know all the details, but she becomes pregnant. And now King David's in a bind. Well, it turns out this is the wife of Uriah the Hittite, who's off at war, fighting for his king and for his country. So what does David do? He's like, well, I got to cover my tracks here a little bit. So he goes out to the front. And he goes to Joab, the head of the mighty men, and he checks in with him. How's it going out here? Just thought I'd see how things were. And da-da-da-da. Hey, I'm hearing some good things about Uriah. Can you summon him? Bring him over here. I'd like to talk to him. And in the course of the events, David's like, hey, why don't you come back with me to the palace? Spend some time with me. One night they have a big meal, have some drinks, and he says, hey, Uriah, why don't you go home and spend the evening with your wife? Well, Uriah, he's a warrior. And one of the things traditionally that warriors don't do is have relations with their wife before they go off to war. And another thing that we try to do, and if there's something weird like that, is we don't try to sneak off and have relations while our buddies are still fighting. Try to stay loyal and professional. So the next morning, David wakes up and he's like, hey, how'd it go? What's up with Uriah? And they're like, well, he slept with the servants last night. Oh. What do I got to do? All right, hey, Uriah. No kidding, I want you to go home. Tonight, I want you to go home and see your wife. So he's ordered to go home. And the next morning, Uriah gets up and he heads back to the front. And then King David's like, hey, good to go? And the servants report back and say, actually, he didn't go into the house. He went home, but he slept on the doorstep. So now what does David do? Now again, Uriah, I keep trying to put myself in the shoes of Uriah. He's got to be wondering, what in the world is going on? We're fighting a war. Why has he singled me out? Why am I special? Why didn't he call other guys back? You know, this is what I do. This is my job. Anyway, he goes back. And unbeknownst to him, a message is sent from King David to Joab. But I would imagine the next morning went something like this. They got up and they started getting ready, and then they went and had a mission brief. And Joab says to Uriah, hey, it's going to be ugly today, but I need you to lead a group of men to the gates of the city where we expect the valiant men of the city to meet you. And the fighting there is going to be ferocious. All right? But I need you there. And Uriah probably said something along the lines of, all right, boys, strap it on. It's going to be a long day. For those of you that are veterans, especially combat veterans, there's some anxiety. There's fear. But you got a job to do, so you rise above it. And Uriah does just that. And not only do they meet the valiant men of the city, but they drive them back. They drive them back to the gates. And at some point, Uriah realizes he's left alone. Now, as a military man, first of all, we don't do that. I mean, no one's left behind. We've heard that over and over and over again. No one's left behind. And so he probably fights and does his thing and realizes he's alone and says, oh, well, they'll figure out that I'm still here and they'll come back and get me. I just got to keep fighting, try to work my way out of this thing. And he probably was wondering, did I miss a bugle call? Did I miss part of the brief this morning? Was there a trumpet that the sound retreat? Did I hear any of that? What's going on? But at some point, Uriah dies. He dies there in the dirt, out in front of some crummy little city that no one's ever heard of. But the story isn't about Uriah. The story points towards David. Because it's that story, that event, where Nathan the prophet calls out King David for his sin and his wickedness, and changes him from this playboy king to the mature king of Israel. Changes how he rules from then forward. But we're not going to stop there, because the story isn't about Uriah, or the story isn't about King David. Because David points to Christ. And we're not going to stop there either. Because Christ, in the Garden of Gethsemane, knows that the story isn't about him either. And even though he prays to God to take the cup, because he knows what's coming, in perfect obedience, he goes to the cross. Because it's not even about Christ, it's about God. It's about God's plan. Now, don't get me wrong, Christ is the mechanism for which we are saved. And it's pretty cool. But it's not about us. So I took the oath of enlistment several times throughout my career. I gave the oath of enlistment even more than that as a re-enlisting officer. But for those of you that are Christians in here, you took an oath of enlistment too. When you ask Christ into your heart and ask for forgiveness and accepted Jesus as your Savior and Lord, you enlisted in the army of God. You are part of this team that isn't about you, that isn't about your kids or anything else that's going on in your world. You are part of the army of Christ that sole purpose is to advance the kingdom of heaven. Now, not everybody's a machine gunner in the army of Christ, as often all the Marines think we're all machine gunners. At least in our heads we do. But there's all kinds of different roles. Preachers, deacons, elders, administrators, and then just the foot soldier that's on the street every day that has an opportunity to share Christ with somebody, whether it's somebody they know or somebody they don't know. Invite somebody to church. To lift up a brother or sister who's struggling. To pray in earnest and without ceasing. You see, military service is sexy and all. And we get our own special day. But I want to encourage you. You're veterans in the army of Christ. And the war that we fight as Christians has much more dire consequences. The good news is, we know how the war ends. We win. How awesome is that? Praise the Lord, we win. But that doesn't give us an opportunity to say, well, I can kick back and relax because I'm on the winning side. So as we wrap up this week of Veterans Day, of the Marine Corps birthday, and all these other events and stuff, and we get looking forward to Thanksgiving, another great American holiday, let's remember who we are. We're members of the army of Christ, advancing the kingdom of heaven. I love you guys. I do. Thank you very much for having me. I hope these words give us all, and myself included, something to reflect on in the days and weeks ahead. Something to be thankful for, especially as Americans in the army of Christ. Thank you.
So after we're done singing and we share, Major Burkett has offered if anybody wants to come and swap stories, wants to ask questions or whatever, he'll stick around for a few minutes, and anybody can talk to him, ask him questions, whatever. We're going to sing America the Beautiful, so if you would stand, we'll sing with that. Let's stand and sing. So we're reminded today that every one of us is a soldier in the army of God. And so I pray that you would take the things that Major Burkett shared with us today, and that you would see yourself as somebody who plays a role, who plays a major role, who has the opportunity every single day with the people that you're around to share the love of Christ with. And so we just pray that today you have an awesome Saturday, that you reflect on the things that God is calling you to, the life that He's called you to, and the things that are in front of you, and the people that are in front of you, that you have the opportunity to share the love of God with. Again, thank you to our first responders, to our veterans. We are so ever grateful for all of your service and continued service. You are heroes in our lives, and we're so grateful for you. So have an awesome day. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow morning. We'll see you later.